Welcome to the SCR Legal Podcast. It's September 18th, 2023. This is not legal advice. I'm Byron King, General Counsel. Legal hotline can be reached at 803-712-3478. Mike Christ is on the board. Thanks for Sharon Stone for promoting. Alan Lightly gave us the top 10 hotlines hot off the press. We'll get to. Tiara Pitts is here. Tiara, introduce yourself, and you coordinate with our guest. Please introduce our guest.
Yes, hi, I'm Tiara Pitts, the Director of Fair Housing here at SCR, and I'm happy to be joined by NAR staffer today. Colette Massengale is an attorney and senior policy representative for fair housing policy with NAR. Previously, she was the Director of Professional Development and Member Engagement at Maryland REALTORS, and she also spent more than 10 years working on their Legal Affairs Department at Maryland REALTORS. So we're super excited to have you here today, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, absolutely. Very happy to be here and talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that we're working on here at NAR.
So what is your current role in NAR?
So I joined NAR actually in September of 2022, September 1st, actually. So I'm coming up on my first anniversary. And I am, as you mentioned, the senior policy representative for fair housing. So I work with the fair housing team. The members of the team include the director, I'm sure you probably know, Alexia Smokler. She's the director of fair housing policy and programs. And we also have Brennan Thompson, who is also one of the analysts on the team. So there are three of us who are working really hard to push our ACT initiatives and our other projects forward.
And when you were at Maryland REALTORS, were you a part of their legal hotline?
Actually, that was one of the one of the big benefits of being a Realtor member at Maryland. We staffed, it was me and four other attorneys. We staffed Maryland Realtors Legal Hotline, which we operated Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then also you could you write your questions and submit them online as well. So yes, we had a hotline. It was very popular, and I would say pretty much always busy. Some of the, I guess, kind of popular hot topic, I guess, areas had a lot of questions around contracts, of course. And deposits. Another big kind of hot topic area was advertising. We had lots of questions around service animals and some emotional support animals. So those are some of the kind of questions that we would get on the hotline.
We get those questions too. And as far as emotional support animals, is there any advice you can give for, sometimes we get a call, for example, if a property manager has a tenant and the tenant has an emotional support animal, the property manager is just wondering how to, go forward with that. And sometimes they say, well, we don't allow certain breeds or certain weight for the animals. And we kind of give them guidance on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest takeaways around this whole conversation of emotional support animals and assistance animals, just generally, is just making sure that you have the dialogue and just understanding that service animals and emotional support animals are not considered, they're not considered pets. And so the same sort of rules that would apply in terms, if for example, a landlord has a no pets policy or something like that, that wouldn't apply to assistance animals. So the dialogue is important, and it is important to have sort of a basic kind of understanding of how emotional support animals are to be treated, and how individuals with emotional support animals are to be treated, and making sure that you kind of ask the right questions. If you need, if there, for example, if a person has an observable disability, then you would avoid asking them for documentation. So again, if their disability is observable, then you wouldn't ask for documentation that supports that they have a disability. But you can see confirmation of a connection between their disability and the assistance animal. So that's you know, you can see confirmation around that, but you don't need to ask for documentation if the disability is readily observable or readily apparent. When it comes to requesting reliable documentation, if, for example, the disability is not readily apparent, then you want to make sure that documentation comes from a healthcare provider that has a relationship with the individual. When it comes to breeds and sizes, I know we touched on this a little bit, and sizes of assistance animals. Housing providers can't really limit the breed or size of an assistance animal, but they can refuse a reasonable accommodation for an assistance animal if that specific animal poses a direct threat that can't be eliminated or reduced by the individual controlling the animal. If a person requesting an animal other than a common domestic animal, that they're like, want like a monkey or something like that, they have to be able to kind of demonstrate the need for that specific animal. And then finally, before denying a reasonable accommodation request, due to lack of information or something like that, a lack of information confirming the individual's disability, the housing provider is encouraged to engage in a good faith dialogue.
Yeah, definitely. We know exactly what you mean. We had a hotline where somebody wanted to bring a comfort boa constrictor on a showing with them. The other thing we say is if the animal causes damages, the dog chews up a wall and it's a service animal and an emotional support animal, that the tenant can still be liable for the damages, the security deposit, or even suing the tenant. So there's some that comes up also. But call the hotline if you have an issue. Tiara's got contact at South Carolina Human Affairs Commission, because we don't know all the answers, and sometimes there's some gray areas, and Colette brought up a lot of them about the breeds and the insurance. So call the hotline, 803-712-3478. Tiara, any kind of emotional support animals, service animals issues that you've thought of while we were going over this?
Yeah, I would just say everything is such a case-by-case analysis that sometimes, of course, we have the general rules from HUD, but on a case-by-case analysis, it's just better for you to call the hotline and just us talk it through than you going on and making a decision that could potentially get you sued or something by just outright denying an ESA or something like that. We would rather you talk to us, and sometimes even recommend you to talk to an additional attorney if it's legal action or if the tenant is threatening legal action against you, because this is a serious fair housing. Getting accused of a fair housing violation is something that's serious, and we want to make sure that it's handled in the right way and that both parties are knowing the rules and the laws around it. Normally on these podcasts, we go over our top legal questions from the month prior. So Byron, would you like to take it away and go over those?
Yeah, thanks, Tiara. Yeah, this is thanks to Alan Lightly. This is hot off the presses. So this is our top 10 hotlines, and Colette, you'll recognize many of these from your days with Maryland Realtors. Number 10 was a tie between agency and property management. You guys were talking about property managers and support animals and service animals. And sometimes you got to get the lawyers involved, right? Especially like Tiara's bringing up the insurance company. There's limits to what realtors, they begin that dialogue, but and people hate us on the hotline saying it's time to hire a lawyer, but sometimes it's time to hire a lawyer. Number 10 was compensation. We've got that video we did with Lisa Alexander. Make sure you watch that. How realtors get paid, buyer agency agreements, MLS, referral agreements. Tiara was even talking about a referral hotline she just had a few minutes ago. And then like Colette was talking about deposits, earnest money, always in our top 10s here. Number 8, professionalism. That includes ethics and arbitration and mediation. We've got mediator school coming up in October if you're interested in becoming a mediator. Number 7 are disclosure issues. Number 6, due diligence. We have in our contract there's a due diligence period on residential properties where buyers and sellers agree for a certain time frame the buyer can inspect, can negotiate repairs, or can pay a pre-agreed a due diligence termination fee to end the deal. Number 5 is license law. Number 4 is advertising. So a lot of that I'm sure we're going to get into on some fair housing issues with advertising. Number 3 is kind of other. That includes a whole bunch of other stuff. For us, vacant land sale, scam, safety issues. September is safety month. Number 2, like Tiara and Colette were talking about forms, always in the top 10. That's number 2. We just had a forms update on several forms on September 12th. Watch some of Austin Smallwood's videos on those, or call the hotline at 803-712-3478. Number one, almost always state law. That's what we went to law school for, and that's what we answer questions on. So thanks for letting me do the top 10. Thanks, Ryan Lightly, for getting that hot off the press for us.
Thank you, Byron. And professionalism was one of the things on that list, and professional development is also important. And I know that, Colette, you have a background in professional development as well. And what are some suggestions on, how to keep members engaged and how to work on that professional development?
Yeah, I think probably one of the biggest I think takeaways when it comes to member engagement is, I think, delivering resources and tools that will help members succeed in the business. Which of course requires listening to hear and to understand what members want, like what is it that they need. When it comes to engaging with folks who are not currently engaged, we think a personal touch really goes a long way. One of the campaigns that we did when I was with Maryland Realtors was a campaign around the theme, Your Voice Matters. And we worked pretty closely with our DEI advisory group members. And we actually did a video with them in it so that members could see themselves reflected, so that the folks who were in the video sort of reflect the membership, which sort of also reflects the communities that they serve. But even before we got into this whole campaign, we had invited NAR's diversity person who at the time was Fred Underwood. So we initially, to kind of get our DEI efforts off the ground, is we had him come, and we had all of our local leadership, our state leadership come, and he led the Leading with Diversity course, or he did a presentation on that. So that kind of kicked us off. And then we established our DEI advisory group. We did an initial campaign, as I mentioned, around Your Voice Matters, really kind of letting our members see themselves reflected in those individuals. Another thing that we did is we asked the members of our DEI advisory group to give us the names of 3 individuals that they thought might be willing to get involved. And so we reached out, staff and members, we reached out to those individuals to talk to them about, what they were passionate about and where they might want to get involved, maybe what a committee or whatever that might kind of align with their passions. And we got a lot of involvement from that sort of personal touch. But I think it really, again, it boils down to letting members know that you are concerned and care about what's important to them, and then giving them the resources and tools that they need to succeed. And also kind of staying on top of it by measuring, are we delivering? So just kind of making sure that we go back constantly and assess and measure whether or not the efforts that we are undertaking are actually paying off. So
yeah, here we try to have a focus on the members and, like you said, getting people involved, but it's really important to get people that aren't, because sometimes it can feel like the same people are at the events or on the committees or, on the board. Is targeting those different voices outside of that closed group. That's really important to try to get different perspectives. So I like that. I wrote that down. Your voice matters, because I could see us doing something around that here in South Carolina as well.
yeah, we thought it was really effective, and also just very kind of exciting to sometimes you kind of have to think outside the box, and try to not be afraid to come up with different ways of connecting and meeting the members where they are.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on that, Colette, because one thing I like having you on here is you got a viewpoint from Maryland. You kind of had the similar jobs to Tiara and I. We always had a housing opportunity committee, and after the Long Island the Newsday scandal, we were able to get funding, some staffing, And NAR has always helped with like the At Home with Diversity and even the Fairhaven simulator, the implicit bias. We created a women's conference. Tara was involved with Sharon Stone and Chelsea Faircloth, Mike Christ on our Fair Housing Conference that won an award with Arello. What was kind of your background with Maryland Realtors? What was kind of the background of your diversity, equity, inclusion program? How was that kind of structured when you were at Maryland Realtors?
So we actually did have a housing opportunity committee as well. Our DEI, the way that we sort of structured our diversity, equity, and inclusions advisory group is we tried to get representation from the multicultural organizations. So we would have a sort of a representative from ARIA, a representative from NAREB, a representative from NAREP, a representative from the Alliance, and just other folks from our local associations who were passionate about the topic. So, and we tried to keep it as a manageable group, maybe 20, 25 folks. We have 17 local associations in Maryland. And so we wanted to get geographical representation and just again, make it as reflective of the membership and of the community as we could. So in addition, like I said, to focusing on having voices from our multicultural partners, we really wanted to have folks who were passionate about the topic and just have diversity in all the different ways that we could, that we could imagine.
Yes, and you mentioned the multicultural groups, which is how I met you at the national, the NAREB conference this last August. So that was really exciting, and it's just such a great opportunity to meet people. But from your perspective, what is the benefits of going to conferences and, even outside of our Realtor conferences?
I think probably one of the biggest benefits of going to conferences is building relationships with folks from these other organizations. So doing that networking, because all these folks all become, friends and just other resources. I can call, Kendra from NAREB if we got a question. So it's really, to me, the benefit is in building the relationships and in the networking that happens. And then also there's a lot of kind of education that goes on, which I think is very beneficial. They'll have, the latest tools, how can I do this better? How can I market better? How can I reach this group or that group better? So there's all kinds of sort of the latest on tools and techniques to, again, sort of help you succeed in the business. So the networking, the resources, the relationships, and the education, I think, are really some great benefits of going to the various conferences.
And do you have any involvement with the Fair Housing Grants that NAR offers to do some collaborations with multiculturals?
Oh, yeah. So we strongly encourage folks, associations, state and local, to apply for the Fair Housing Grant. There's also a DEI grant as well. Maryland Realtors used a Fair Housing Grant to put on a Fair Housing Summit, and it worked out really well. We hosted the summit at in one of our I was going to say one of the local associations, but it actually wasn't at the association, but it was really near one of our associations. It gave us an opportunity. It just so happened at that time, we had overhauled our Fair Housing course. So we took it as an opportunity to launch the new Fair Housing course. We had some national speakers come and deliver some really engaging presentations. We had a panel. We had that consisted of both members and local AE folks who are passionate and talking about what they're doing. And we also had a member from the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights come and talk about, sort of hot topics and issues. So we really had a full day of it, which included the CEE. And, one of the ways that we were able to offset the cost of that was through NAR's Fair Housing Grant. And the application process is very straightforward. It's just sort of easy. I mean, you kind of let them know what it is that you want to do, why you're doing it. And it also gave us an opportunity to collaborate and connect with our state Fair Housing Enforcement Agency and sort of grow that relationship. So it was kind of a win-win. And again, fairly easy process to go through. So yeah, we encourage our associations, state and local around the country, to utilize the Fair Housing Grant as a way to just simply kind of raise awareness about fair housing issues with the membership, and also to build relationships with the enforcement agencies around, in the state. So it's a win-win.
Colette, with those grants kind of behind the curtains, from your viewpoint, when you get those grants from state associations or local associations, what are some things, who's involved in the decision making? Is it NAR staff or is it leadership? And what kind of things do you look for in these grants when you're deciding to approve the grant or not approve the grant?
So we are, again, there is, our goal is to raise awareness around fair housing. So we want people to get the grants. Staff is essentially, I believe at the time it was Alexia. So, she looks at the grant, Alexia Smokler, the director, looks at the grants and makes a decision. But again, I mean, if you've got like a great project or idea or event that you want to plan, and it meets the objective of raising awareness about fair housing, then it's kind of a no-brainer. So,
could you speak about the recent changes to the fair housing education requirement that NAR has recently implemented?
Yes. In May of this year, the board of directors adopted this new fair housing training, which will take effect in 2025. So all 1.5 million realtors beginning in 2025, along with the code of ethics requirement to take code of ethics, they will also have to take a 2-hour fair housing course. There are several courses that realtors can take that will meet that requirement. And you all mentioned one of them was At Home with Diversity. If you take that, that will meet the requirement. The bias override course will meet the requirement. Any fair housing course that an association offers that meets the learning objectives as established by NAR would meet the requirement. Any fair housing course that's created by a state real estate commission that meets the learning objectives that NAR has established. And then once we are done updating Fair Haven, and making sure that it encompasses all the learning objectives and primarily the history, because if you've taken the Fair Haven training simulation today, it doesn't necessarily have that sort of history component. So we're in the process of updating that. Once that's updated, that will be another way that you can satisfy the requirement. So really excited about what we're doing around that. And we think it will be very, very helpful to our realtors to have this requirement. One of the things that we learned from doing some research on licensing laws, fair housing, well, just licensing and education around the country, is we learned that there are quite a few states that do not require fair housing education for either pre-licensing or continuing education. So the fact that we now have this fair housing education requirement, that will be very helpful to our members and to eliminating and minimizing opportunities to violate fair housing law. So we think it's a good thing.
We're definitely going to be working on that because we already do a fair housing virtual conference every April. So if we could, do that but make it into the objectives, then we could kind of do two things at once and fulfill those requirements for our members. We've been focusing on culture and just, making sure that we are creating and sustaining an inclusive culture here at SCR. How is NAR working to help with the culture there?
I would say, I think one of the biggest things that we are focused on as far as creating a more inclusive culture is following our DEI strategic plan. Under that plan, there are several pillars. We have a pillar under executive commitment that speaks to prioritizing diversity and having it sort of building it into our structures and our processes and making sure that we're measuring our initiatives. We have a membership pillar that speaks to our members sort of seeing themselves in leadership, in the committees, in the governance, addressing bias, and just kind of doing what we can to encourage and get more folks involved on committees and on the leadership track. With our advocacy, we're promoting programs that, advance homeownership and availability and affordability and increase supply. That's a big issue. And with our multicultural partners, again, we're building those relationships, enhancing them, elevating those organizations within our structure and our on the national level, and seeing what we can do to pipeline some of those leaders so that they're on the leadership track in our organization. So essentially, we are doing what we can to move forward our objectives under our DEI strategic plan.
Yes, well, thank you so much for that. And we're going to be on the lookout for that as well, and seeing everything that you guys are doing, as well as preparing for those grants to open back up in January, because they got a lot of success. So I know that they were running out of funding because of how popular that they were. So we're going to try to apply for those early and just go ahead and start thinking about what do we want to do for next year. And Byron, do you have any?
Yeah, just a couple things kind of related to what Colette was talking about affordability and fair housing. Colette, one thing that you can tell your folks up there in NAR about that we're seeing is insurance, availability of insurance. At our coast, we're hearing reports of insurance going up 300%, 400%, 500%, even 600%. So that's an affordability issue we're wrestling with here in South Carolina. We're doing an insurance webinar on September 21st with Director of Insurance Michael Wise. September Safety Month, we've got a forewarn. Tiara, why don't you do your usual warning about using forewarn and fair housing, about being uniform with forewarn?
Yes, so we have forewarn, which if you're not aware, it's a member benefit now that you can easily look up someone. Let's say you're about to show a house and you want to do a quick background check essentially on that person to make sure they are who they say they are, that they do own the property that they say they own, and of course, the main priority is realtor safety when using this. However, the fair housing implications is you want to use it universally the same way every time. You don't want to pick and choose when you use it or how you use it. You want to have a policy that says, okay, if you're taking someone out on a showing, you can look them up in this way, just so that we're making sure that things aren't being used differently for different people. Also, you don't want to improperly use that software and use it to look up, someone you're going on a date with or something that's totally not related to the business of real estate, because that is incorrect use and not the proper way that it's designed to be used. So just use it uniformly and use it for real estate, not outside of the business, would be the biggest things that people should look out for with that.
Yeah, definitely. And then related to safety, we're going to a big city, Savannah, Georgia, in October 16th to the 19th for our Region 4 conference. Colette, we've got North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Kentucky all coming to one conference, so we're excited. First time we've done that. September 12th, the forum's updated. Make sure you watch Rennie Diedrich. She was on the forums committee and talked about forums changes from a broker perspective, talked about harassment issues and hotline issues from a broker perspective. We've got a mediation school coming up in October. A couple things that came up on the hotline real quick. Self-dealing. If you're self-dealing, if you're selling your property to a brokerage buyer client or you're buying a brokerage listing, make sure that you disclose that up front in writing. We have a new form, SCR 540, because there's a lot of ethics that apply to self-dealing. You have to disclose it. So that's Articles 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 can apply to that. Disclose it. That Form 450. And there's other risk management. Contact the hotline if you're engaged in self-dealing. Advertising, we touched on a little bit. That's fair housing. Colette and Tiara, what kind of things do y'all see in fair housing, advertising related, that you've seen in your experience? Things that have kind of gotten realtors into hot water with advertising and fair housing issues.
I would say because we're in South Carolina, there are historical properties, and you want to make sure that you're advertising and describing them in the right way. That is, you can advertise that it is a historical property, but you want to watch the language that you use and not say anything that's offensive or, things that can be advertised in a way as favoring one group over another, because of course the history can build into the value of the property, but you just want to make sure that you're using correct terms and not, accidentally doing something that's in violation of fair housing or advertising rules that we have.
Colette, what are some things you saw while you're at Maryland, or even you've heard while you're at NAR with advertising, how realtors have gotten themselves in some hot water with advertising issues? We've had some stuff with photos. Maybe there's certain symbols are very divisive now. The country's kind of divisive anyway, so people are on edge anyway. So we kind of tell listing agents, hey, go through the house and just secure anything that's kind of controversial. Anything that you've seen while you're at Maryland or NAR on advertising issues in fair housing?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. We also have been seeing sort of issues around symbols and things like that. So we absolutely give that same kind of similar advice around, making sure that you kind of go through the property and you don't have anything in there that's going to suggest to somebody that their presence is not wanted in that community. So we've seen that. We also strongly encourage folks to use the Equal Housing Opportunity logo in their marketing materials, and to market in general, like if you're going to market in a sort of a very specific kind of publication, to make sure you're also marketing in a publication that has general circulation. But yeah, definitely sort of the issues around symbols and things like that have come up.
Yeah, one thing, and you guys touched on a little bit talking, and it even goes to our meetings coming up, harassment. We've had a couple hotlines lately with realtors being ugly to each other. But a reminder, harassment can be a crime in South Carolina. We have our code of conduct for harassment issues, sexual harassment, or just general harassment at SCR events and SCR business. There's rules for the staff. Berating a staff's not allowed, but in most local boards and MLSs have similar rules. Tiara and Colette, standard practice 10.5 in the Code of Ethics about hate, harassing speech based on protected class. What are some things that you guys have seen on the hotline or at Maryland or NAR under this vital new policy where realtors are not allowed to use hate speech or harassing speech under standard practice 10.5 under the Code of Ethics?
Yeah, I would say the biggest change and amendment to that was when it got out of just the real estate business and said you can't do this, period. And that includes online, Facebook, even a private group, even just at the bar with your friends saying these things. Like, I think that was a good stance that NAR took, that we're not just going to say, don't do this in real estate, don't do this, period. So it's pretty expansive, because a lot of business, we don't really have to be face-to-face as we used to, and a lot of things can go on through text messaging, emails, Facebook. So for them to expand it out to those situations, I thought that was a good change. But of course there was pushback, and it's definitely not meant to be a infringement on your free speech. We have elections coming up this year, and it's not meant to say, you have to vote for this person or you can't say this and that. It's just focus on the hate speech, the slurs, the, harassment, not just general, I like, this political candidate or that one, is really rising above that and for protection, not to overextend or infringe on your freedom of speech rights.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we think we're big on checklists, and so creating a checklist for not just your advertising, but just for how you are communicating on social media, as a way of sort of kind of putting a check on yourself. We emphasize how important a role realtors play in communities. They are looked up to by, they're seen in a very positive light. And so I think it's important to have, these checklists in place that sort of speak to, that high, the way that that realtors are viewed in communities. So strongly recommend a social media checklist, bottom line, to help you kind of stay on track with how you're communicating.
And you guys are talking a lot of these groups, and we all know the group's name. Tiara, what are some of these groups? I know we have jargon and acronyms, and we all know them, but for the viewer that might not know, what are we talking about with these groups that you guys were mentioning?
Yeah, so next week I will be in Miami for the NAR Conference, which is the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. I think that is that acronym. And that is going to be focused on Hispanic home buyers, which are a leading class of minority home buyers, just specific issues that face that demographic. And that's how a lot of the multiculturals are, such as the Alliance, which focuses on LGBTQ issues in real estate, of course, because each group can have their different cultural issues or different barriers to securing that equal access to housing. So the conference is really focused on that. And then there's also ARIA, which is the Asian American, I think also Pacific Islanders is included into that, and their conference is in October in Chicago. And then there's NAREB, which is the African American Real Estate Association, which of course focuses on that demographic. So it's 4 different multicultural groups that are all in partnership with NAR. And of course you can partner at the local level and state level. NAR offers funding to do any type of activities in conjunction with any of these groups. They even offer about $1,000 grant to send your a staffer or a high-level member to the event as well. So it's just a lot of opportunities to get involved and to try to bridge the gap and to connect, because a lot of the people that are in these different multicultural associations are also realtors, but they may be just engaged in their association and not engaged with the realtors. So it's like bringing it all together, essentially.
And Colette, you'll be proud to know Tiara and the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion team actually created these standard forms. They're explanations of our standard forms, but they're in Spanish translations for our major forms, our residential purchase agreement and our lease agreements and disclosure. Can I kind of talk about the translation explanation things that you guys worked on, please?
Yeah, so DEI looked at translating our forms because we do have a lot of Spanish speaking, either home buyers, agents, sellers, just people that speak Spanish, and so that was our first translation. But of course, we want to extend that to different languages as we grow and as we see the need for it in different areas and look at that demographic information. And it's really to just be more inclusive and to not just have something in English where everyone might not be able to read that and understand that because that's not their first language. So we wanted to just try to be as inclusive as possible, because when you buy a home, it's something very, a big purchase, and you want to be able to have that paperwork to take home with you in your language. So that was kind of our mission behind that. Of course, we hired a third-party translation company to really make sure that it was handled correctly. And yeah, so we'll be working on extending that to even more, because we just started with our most popular use forms such as our regular sales agreement, our lease agreement, buyer agency, things like that. But we have a lot of forms, so hopefully we'll expand it even more.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic.
Tiara, any last words? Colette, any last words?
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about what NAR is doing, and we hope that the resources that we're putting out, members are finding helpful and impactful, and I'm happy to come back.
Yeah, and thanks for joining us. Realtors, keep it safe, legal, and profitable.